Welcome to Vanguard, where humans aren't the underdogs. We're the endgame. Enjoy the journey. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council floated in the vacuum, like a cathedral carved from starlight in memory. It orbited a dying red star, the last ember of a once mighty system, its glow reflecting off the crystal latticework of the Council's ancient structure. For 50 millennia, this hall had served as a sanctuary of diplomacy, a place where the galaxy's oldest civilizations gathered to debate, negotiate, and maintain peace. Tonight, it felt more like a tomb. Hundreds of species filled the tiered platforms circling the chamber. Amphibious beings floated in nutrient tanks. Smoke creatures drifted like sentient fog. Some sat in anti-gravity thrones, others coiled upon bioluminescent cushions. Even the energy-based species, the silent flickering lights known as the Orivants, dimmed slightly as though holding their breath. At the center stood Ambassador Veltrin of the Gelnari Collective. Tall, slender, and shimmering like living pearl, she normally radiated soft pastels that mirrored serenity. But now her skin swirled with purples so dark they were nearly black. Fear, despair, a grief too vast to hide. She raised her hands. Honored Council, my people are dying. Her voice, soft, telepathically resonant, echoed through translation arrays. No one interrupted. They all knew why she had come. Every corner of the galaxy had heard rumors of the same nightmare. Veltrin swallowed, her colors shifting with pain. The Kreshkar swarm has entered our territory. They have consumed 2 of our colony worlds. Every living thing, every plant, every creature, every citizen was processed. Her voice cracked on the last word. A hologram flared to life above the chamber floor. It showed Valora Secundus, once a thriving world of azure seas and silver forests. Now its surface was stripped bare, carved down to lifeless stone. Millions of insectoid ships, living organic horrors, crawled across its continents like locusts on a corpse. Gasps, rattles, and electronic bursts filled the hall. They fed their biovessels with the remains of our world, Veltrin continued. 3 billion souls, gone in 3 cycles. Her hands trembled. And now they are attacking Valora Prime, my home. She lowered her gaze. We have 2.3 billion citizens still alive. Our planetary shields will fail in 3 cycles. Perhaps less. Without intervention, my species will not survive. Whispers broke out, clicking, chittering, pulsing lights. Each species' voice expressed a unique language of alarm. The Ratani delegation, the crystalline people, emitted a mournful chime. The floating jellyfish-like Vexer flashed distress colors across their tendrils. Even the Orivants dimmed again. The presiding figure of the council, High Chancellor Morden of the Torthine Dominion, slowly rose. His slug-like body glistened under the crystalline lights, dozens of eye stalks focusing on Veltrin. Ambassador, Morden said heavily, we understand your pain, but the Kreshkar cannot be fought by conventional means. They number in the billions. They feel no fear, no hesitation. They are a consumption species, violence incarnate. No fleet, no civilized fleet, Veltrin interrupted, bitterness sliding like black ink across her skin. You mean that? Several counselors recoiled at her tone. Counselor Zextari, a being of floating geometric shapes that rearranged with emotion, spoke next. Ambassador, our fleets are not built for war. We have spent 50,000 years evolving past violence. Our ships explore, they heal, they enlighten. Veltrin stared at them, hollow and shaking. How fortunate for you, she whispered. My people also built gardens instead of weapons. We cultivated empathy instead of armies. We believed in peace. And now we are being eaten alive, while the galaxy's greatest civilization tells us they have evolved beyond helping us. Silence slammed into the chamber. For a moment, even the star outside seemed to dim. We cannot risk our species, Counselor Vorthen finally said. His shimmering wings folded tightly. The Kreshkar devour military resistance first. Any who fight them perish. The Varais clans fell in 12 cycles. The Koran Empire lasted 18. If we intervene, we doom ourselves. Veltrin's voice dropped to a whisper. So you will let us die. That is not what we— Then who will help us? She demanded, her colors flickering violently. Tell me, who in this galaxy still remembers how to fight a monster? No one answered. Not a single delegation spoke. Not one offered hope. Veltrin closed her eyes, breath trembling. When she opened them again, a new color swirled through her. Something darker, more desperate. There is one species, every eye in the chamber fixed on her. What species? Morden asked cautiously. Veltrin inhaled. The Deathworlders. The hall erupted in chaos. Whistles, shrieks, chimes, and electromagnetic bursts filled the space. Delegates recoiled. Some physically shielded themselves. Others projected fear colors or warnings into their translators. Absolutely not. Zextari's geometric body spasmed erratically. You cannot be serious. Morden's eye stalks whipped toward Veltrin. You would unleash them into our space? Veltrin's voice was steady now, resolved by terror. I am entirely serious. The humans from Earth, the species you quarantined because you feared them. And for good reason, Zextari snapped. Their planet is classified as a Class 12 death world. The diseases alone would kill half the Council races. Their predators can consume sapient beings whole. Their storms destroy cities, their oceans, and they survived, Veltrin countered. A counselor of living smoke drifted forward, voice whispering like wind through stone. They thrived, Ambassador. They became apex predators on a world where everything tries to kill them. They hunt by persistence. They chase prey until it collapses. They have never learned to give up. Morden pounded the floor with a heavy appendage. Humans are dangerous. Their history is violence. Endless wars, entire cities destroyed, nuclear fire, chemical plagues. And yet, Veltrin said, in 18 months of contact, they have attacked no one. They ask to join the Council. They speak of cooperation. They send ambassadors, not warships. Pretty words, Zextari hissed. Their entertainment glorifies violence. Their heroes are warriors. They say war is hell and still wage it. Maybe, Veltrin whispered, that is why we need them. The hall fell silent again. A shared terror, mixed with reluctant curiosity, flowed through the gathered species. No one wanted humans involved. But no one could deny the truth. The Council had no warriors left, no armies, no worlds hardened by struggle. But humans? Humans were born in struggle, Morden spoke quietly. If we contact the Deathworlders, we acknowledge that our philosophy has failed. That violence has a place in this galaxy. No, Veltrin said softly. You acknowledge that life matters, that survival matters, that letting children die because of principle is the true barbarism. Her voice broke. Send the message. I beg you. If there is any compassion left in this council, let my people have a chance to exist. The High Chancellor looked around the chamber. For once, even the ancient species seemed afraid. Not of the Kreshkar, but of the choice before them. Finally, Morden lowered his eye stalks. Very well. Transmit the distress call to the Sol system. Mark it urgent priority. He paused. And may the old stars forgive us for what we are about to unleash. The message launched into the void, faster than light, carrying coordinates, tactical data, and one final plea. Help us. And far away, on a blue death world orbiting a yellow sun, someone would soon answer. The distress call reached the Sol system in the early hours of an otherwise quiet morning. In a windowed office aboard the United Earth Defense Command headquarters, suspended in orbit above the blue curve of Earth, Admiral Catherine Morrison nursed a cup of real coffee. Steam curled upward, carrying the rich scent of roasted beans grown in orbital hydro farms. She savored it slowly. Real coffee was a luxury, something she believed sharpened judgment. She would need her judgment Soon, a soft chime broke the silence. "Admiral," her aide said as he stepped into the office, face pale. "We've received an incoming transmission from the Galactic Council. Priority, urgent." Catherine froze. The Council did not contact humanity. Not like this. In the 18 months since Earth had discovered alien life, the Council had sent exactly 7 official messages, and none had been friendly. 6 were variations of "remain in your system." The 7th was an extensive rulebook on acceptable behavior for a dangerous species. Never once had they sent anything labeled urgent. "Play it," Catherine ordered. The hologram flickered to life. Veltrin appeared, shimmering skin dark with terror, eyes swirling in chaotic colors as her voice trembled through the translation. "My people are under attack. 2 worlds have fallen. Our home world has 3 cycles left. Please, if any humans are listening, please help us. We have children, families. We do not want to die. Please." The message ended abruptly. Then came the tactical data, coordinates of Valora Prime, Kreshkar fleet estimates, planetary shield integrity, casualty projections. Catherine stood still for several seconds. She had seen battlefields. She had witnessed desperation. But something about the way the ambassador's voice broke, it struck deeper. Perhaps because humans knew that sound. The sound of someone who had lost nearly everything but refused to give up hope. Her fingers tightened around the coffee mug. "Get me the Earth Assembly," she said quietly. "Emergency session, now. And alert the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. They have work to do." The Earth Assembly. 3 hours later, Catherine stood in the grand circular chamber of the United Earth Assembly. Even in crisis, the room buzzed with political tension. Delegates from every region, Africa, Europa, Pan-Asia, the Americas, the Martian colonies, filled their seats. On the screens behind Catherine, Veltrin's message played again. A few delegates shifted uncomfortably. One wiped something from his eye. Catherine began. "The Kreshkar swarm is a hive mind species. Their bioships consume organic matter to fuel growth. They have destroyed dozens of civilizations. They cannot be reasoned with. They do not negotiate. They only eat." The hall murmured. "And the Council?" Ambassador Chen asked, arms folded. "Doing nothing," Catherine said flatly. "They have no military capabilities. They evolved past violence. Their ships are exploration vessels. Their weapons disable, not destroy." Representative Kowalski leaned forward, brow arched. "So they come crawling to us, after quarantining our entire system, calling us unstable, dangerous, primitive, and now they want help?" His tone dripped with sarcasm and old resentment. Catherine did not deny him his anger. "Yes," she replied, "they're desperate." "And why," Kowalski pressed, "should we protect a council that spent a year treating us as a threat?" The question hung heavy. Catherine let silence settle before answering. "Because it is the right thing to do." A few delegates shifted in their seats. "There are 2.3 billion innocent people on Valora Prime," Catherine continued. "They did nothing wrong. They did not attack anyone. They simply lived in the path of something monstrous. If we do nothing, they die." General Okonkwo, commander of the Martian Defense Legion, rose from her seat. "If we turn our backs now," she said, "we tell the galaxy exactly who we are. A species that watches strangers die for convenience. That is not who we claim to be." She glanced around the chamber, gaze sharp. "And if the Kreshkar finish with the Gel Nari," Okonkwo added, "they continue consuming everything between them and us. They are 200 light years away. They will reach Earth eventually. I would rather fight them there than here." The assembly chamber fell quiet. Representative Ahmadi of the African Union asked, "How long until Valora Prime falls?" 3 cycles, Catherine replied. "Approximately 6 Earth days. If we depart immediately, we reach the system with perhaps 6 hours to spare." "And what do you require?" Ambassador Chen asked softly. Catherine exhaled. "Everything." The room erupted into whispers and arguments, but something had shifted. Beneath the noise, there was a hard, rising determination. Humans were many things, flawed, angry, unpredictable. But in moments like this, the species had a way of snapping into unity. A vote was called. The result was immediate and absolute. Unanimous. Earth would answer, preparing for war. The orbital shipyards above Earth thrummed with activity like a hive of steel and fire. The Terran Expeditionary Fleet, 47 warships designed during humanity's internal conflicts, waited in formation. These vessels were not elegant like council ships. They were not beautiful. They were not peaceful. They were built for one function, to win. The flagship, UES Indomitable, was a 3-kilometer fortress plated in ablative armor, its hull bristling with railgun cannons, missile bays, and plasma arrays. A blunt statement of purpose: do not fight us unless you are ready to die. Catherine stepped onto the command deck, boots echoing across polished steel. "Report," she called. "All ships at combat readiness," her tactical officer replied. "Crews at full complement. Marines prepping drop pods. FTL drives charged." She walked through hangar bays where pilots performed pre-flight checks. Engineers sprinted between consoles. Marines in powered armor performed last-minute drills. She stopped at the Marine sector when she spotted Sergeant Marcus Chen. Scars lined his cheek from plasma burns years ago. His squad stood behind him, 12 soldiers, each with a different story, background, and accent, but united under one banner. "Sergeant," Catherine greeted. "Admiral," Marcus nodded. "I hear we're saving a species that thinks we're monsters." "We're saving people who need us," she corrected. Marcus held her eyes for a moment, expression softening. "Then we'll get it done." Further in the ship, Commander Lisa Park briefed her fighter pilots. "The Kreshkar's bioships are tough," she said, tapping a display, "but not invulnerable. Railguns tear through them. Plasma burns them. The trick is surviving long enough to shoot." A young pilot raised a hand. "Commander, what about numbers?" Lisa smirked grimly. "Oh, we're absolutely outnumbered. Massively. But we're humans. We do stupid things and make them work." Laughter rippled through the squadron. Not good-humored laughter, but the kind shared by people ready to gamble their lives. Down in engineering, Chief Rodriguez tightened the modulators of the FTL core. "How fast can we push it?" Catherine asked from the doorway. Rodriguez snorted. "Faster than is legal. Faster than is safe. Faster than any sane species would try." Catherine smiled. "Good. Do it." The departure. 6 hours after receiving the distress call, the fleet was ready. Catherine stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, staring out at the swirling clouds of Earth below. A death world full of storms and predators and disasters. A world that had tried to kill its dominant species for millions of years and failed. "All ships," Catherine said, activating fleet-wide comms. "Our destination is Valora Prime. Our objective? Protect 2.3 billion lives. The Council believes the swarm cannot be fought. Let's go prove them wrong." "FTL drives charging," the navigator called. Space around the fleet shimmered. The air crackled. Reality trembled. "Open the channel to Valora," Catherine ordered. "What should we tell them, Admiral?" She allowed herself a small, predatory smile. "Tell them, help is coming. The Deathworlders are on their way." Space tore open. 47 human warships punched through the fabric of reality and vanished into the darkness, racing toward a world on the brink of extinction. The moment the Terran Expeditionary Fleet tore free of Earth's orbit, time became a weapon. On Valora Prime, the sky had already begun to change. Great shimmering auroras, normally symbols of peace and atmospheric balance, now twisted into violent spirals as planetary defenses pushed beyond safe limits. Every activation of the shields drained what little energy remained in the world's failing power cores. Across the surface, cities dimmed. Whole districts went black to conserve power for the final stand. 3 cycles. That was the word being whispered in every language of the Gelnari. 3 cycles until extinction. 3 cycles until the shields failed. 3 cycles until the swarm reached the surface in full force. In evacuation shelters deep beneath crystal cities, families huddled together. Telepaths shared fear without words. Children clutched their parents as the distant tremors of orbital impacts shook the ground like approaching thunder. On the Capitol terraces, Ambassador Veltrin stood alone, gazing up at the burning sky. She could feel every death in the telepathic hum of her species. Each life extinguished sent shockwaves through her mind. They were still fighting, still dying, still waiting. And across 200 light-years of warp space, the Deathworlders were coming. Inside the FTL storm, human faster-than-light travel was not gentle. Where the Council bent space with harmonic elegance, human drives shattered it. The fleet existed in a corridor of screaming physics, dimensional pressure crushing against hulls that were never meant to bend. Gravity twisted, time warped. Electrical storms danced across armored plating like wild lightning. Inside the Indomitable, the decks vibrated constantly. Bulkheads groaned. Even seasoned veterans moved with careful precision as artificial gravity fought to remain stable. Sergeant Marcus Chen sat in the Marine briefing bay, his helmet resting beside him. Around him, his squad checked weapons in silence. Private Reyes whispered, "You ever fought something that didn't know fear?" Marcus didn't look up. "Yeah, on Earth. We called them hurricanes." A few quiet chuckles broke the tension. Across the deck, Corporal Davis adjusted the power feed on his rifle. 6 hours to a dying world, he muttered. Hell of a way to start a week. Marcus finally lifted his eyes. That's 6 hours closer to stopping a genocide. No one argued with that. The pilots. In the fighter bay, Commander Lisa Park floated upside down in low gravity while recalibrating her targeting visor. Around her, pilots drifted in their flight harnesses, running simulations. One of the youngest, Ensign Taylor, swallowed hard. "Commander, have we ever faced something like this?" Lisa turned to him slowly. "No," she said truthfully. "We faced enemies that hated us, enemies that feared us, enemies that wanted our territory." She paused. "This one just wants to eat us." Taylor laughed nervously. "That's worse, isn't it?" Lisa smiled thinly. "Yeah, but that also means it can't be bribed, can't be intimidated, and won't care when we start killing it." That earned a few steadier breaths. The engineers. Deep in the engineering core, Chief Rodriguez monitored the FTL containment rings. Every percentage above standard limits screamed warnings across his console. "FTL output at 119%, his assistant said. "Containment field is degrading." Rodriguez cracked his neck. "Good. That means we're winning." "Chief, .. Relax," he growled. "These drives were built during the Mars Rebellion. They survived orbital nukes and vacuum implosions. The universe can scream all at once. It'll hold." The countdown. Back on Valora Prime, the countdown markers fell relentlessly. 72 hours. The first of the outer orbital defense platforms fell. A living mass of Kreshkar bioships wrapped around the station and dissolved it in minutes. The shockwave lit the planet's night side like a dying star. 48 hours. Evacuation reached critical mass. Emergency shuttles lifted from shattered launch bays under constant attack. Each launch was a gamble. Sometimes they made orbit, sometimes they disappeared in bursts of acidic fire. 36 hours. The outer moons shattered when a Kreshkar megavessel bored directly through its core to harvest raw minerals. The debris rained like burning meteors through the upper atmosphere. In underground shelters, people prayed, not to gods, but to distant Deathworlders they had never seen. The long night on Earth. On Earth, news of the mission spread in waves. Not through official channels at first, those were slow and cautious, but through whispers, data leaks, intercepted council chatter, and the sheer impossibility of hiding 47 warships tearing open space. Cities gathered in silence. Crowds filled plazas. Entire nations stayed awake as the fleet vanished beyond the stars. On a farm in what had once been rural Vietnam, an old woman folded her hands and stared at the night sky. On a rooftop in New York, a group of children watched the stars and asked their parents where the soldiers were going. Across the planet, billions realized the same truth at once. Humans were going to war for a species they had never met. Private moments. In a quiet corridor aboard the Indomitable, Marcus recorded a message. "If you're seeing this, Mom, then it means I didn't make it back." He hesitated, jaw tightening. "I don't regret going. Those people didn't choose this, and somebody had to stand in front of the monster. I love you." He sealed the file and sent it into encrypted storage. Elsewhere, Lisa Park stared at an old photo anchored to her wrist console. Her younger sister in a graduation gown, laughing under a summer sky. Lisa shut off the display and slid into her cockpit. 12 hours. The final stretch of FTL transit began. Navigation errors spiked as local space-time distortions from the crash car swarm bled outward through subspace. The swarm's very presence bent physics. On Valora Prime, the shields flickered for the first time. In the council chamber, panic reigned. Delegates watched the tactical feeds in horror as the swarm tightened its orbit. Millions of bioships stacking in layered attack formations. For the first time in 50,000 years, the Council understood what it meant to face annihilation without any weapon to stop it. "They're too late," someone whispered. Mordan said nothing. 6 hours. The Terran fleet emerged at the edge of the Valora system in a storm of screaming space. Reality snapped. FTL shockwaves rippled through the void like invisible tsunamis. Even seasoned crews staggered as artificial gravity compensated violently. Catherine Morrison gripped the railing of the bridge as nausea surged through her. "Status," she demanded. "Full emergence successful," the navigator replied. "No ships lost in transit." Her gaze snapped to the tactical display, and her breath caught. 2 of the outer planets were already dead. Gray, airless, hollowed. Around Valora Prime, the sensor field was a living nightmare. Millions of moving contacts. Endless. Writhing, hungry, and between them and the world, only 17 battered Gelnari ships still fought. "They're breaking," the tactical officer whispered. "At this rate, the swarm breaches in 2 hours." Catherine's jaw hardened. "We made it," she said, barely. The final message. Before weapons powered up, Catherine opened a direct channel transmission to Valora Prime. The image of Veltrin flickered to life on the main display. Her colors flared with shock, then disbelief, then something dangerously close to hope. "You came," she whispered. "We're here," Catherine answered, "and we're not leaving until your people are safe." Veltrin's voice trembled. "You cannot stop them. No one ever has." Catherine's expression shifted into the cold, focused calm of a predator about to strike. "Then they're about to meet a species that doesn't accept ever." She cut the channel and turned to her crew. "All ships," she said, her voice steady and absolute. "Weapons free. Formation Delta 7. Target the densest clusters first." The countdown on Valora Prime reached its final mark. 2 hours. The war for Valora was about to begin. The first human shots were not beams of light or elegant lances of energy. They were chunks of tungsten. "Railguns hot," the tactical officer announced. "Targeting solutions locked." Fire. Across 47 human warships, magnetic accelerators roared. Invisible slugs, each weighing several tons, launched at a fraction of light speed. Space itself seemed to flinch as the projectiles crossed the void. When they struck, there was no flash of heat. There was impact. The first wave of Kreshkar bioships disintegrated as if struck by divine fists. Living armor shattered. Internal organs liquefied into clouds of frozen debris. Entire attack formations vanished in less than 3 seconds. Confirmed kills in the tens of thousands, sensors reported. For the first time in its ancient existence, the Kreshkar hive mind felt something unexpected. Confusion. Prey was not supposed to strike first. Prey was not supposed to hit back this hard. The swarm reacted instantly. Millions of bioships peeled away from Valora Prime and surged toward the human fleet in a living tidal wave. The void became a storm of fanged shadows and glowing organic engines. "They're abandoning the planet," an officer shouted. "They're targeting us." Catherine Morrison did not hesitate. "Good. Keep them on us." Missile bays open, hundreds, then thousands of nuclear missiles poured from human destroyers and cruisers in coordinated attack patterns. These were not city killers. They were area denial weapons, designed to erase vast volumes of space. The first detonations bloomed silently. White fire tore open the darkness. Entire swarms vanished inside expanding spheres of annihilation. Tens of thousands of bioships died in a single heartbeat. But the swarm did not slow. It adapted. Survivors shifted formations, dispersing into fractal attack webs. New biovessels moved to the front, thicker armor, heat-resistant carapaces, electromagnetic interference nodes that disrupted guidance systems. "They're learning," the tactical officer warned. "Then we learn faster," Catherine replied. "Fighters, launch." The sky fills with fire. Carrier bays open like steel maws. Hundreds of human fighters screamed into the void, plasma engines burning blue-white. Commander Lisa Park led the first squadron straight into the storm. The void became chaos. Bioships darted like living torpedoes. Acidic projectiles splashed across fighter shields. Tentacled megavessels coiled and released clouds of smaller attack organisms that moved like weaponized schools of fish. Lisa pulled her fighter into a brutal, high-G turn, one that would have pulped an alien pilot. Her body screamed in protest. Blood tasted metallic in her mouth. She fired. Twin plasma cannons ripped through 3 bioships in one burst. Organic matter boiled instantly. Internal sacs ruptured violently. The debris field became a graveyard of burning flesh and frozen shards. "Stick close," she shouted. "Don't let them isolate you." Behind her, Ensign Taylor was struggling. His targeting systems spasmed as Kreshkar interference flooded his cockpit. A cluster of smaller biohunters latched onto his wings. "They're on me. I can't shake them." "Roll hard right and dump countermeasures," Lisa barked. He tried. It wasn't enough. 3 acidic spines punched through his hull. Warning lights filled his cockpit. Atmosphere vented violently into space. "I'm hit. Systems failing." Taylor gasped. Lisa clenched her teeth. "Eject! Taylor, eject!" There was a pause. "If I eject," he said quietly, "they'll eat me." Then his fighter surged forward, directly into a dense cluster of bioships. His remaining missiles detonated. The explosion erased dozens of Kreshkar vessels in a spherical storm of plasma. Taylor was never found. Lisa did not slow. She did not scream. She simply whispered, "Good kill," and kept firing. The deflector falls. On the left flank, 3 human destroyers, HMS Defiant, HMS Valkyrie, and UES Canberra, were swarmed simultaneously. Bioships stacked on their hulls like living tumors. Armor breach on decks 4 through 9. They're burning through internal bulkheads. We're losing life support. Captain Rodriguez of the Defiant watched the tactical map as his ship vanished beneath enemy mass. He could hear claws shrieking against the hull. Acid ate through steel with terrifying speed. "Engineering report," he demanded calmly. A bloodied officer staggered into frame. "Reactor integrity failing, Captain. They're inside the core chamber." Rodriguez closed his eyes for half a second. Then he opened them and toggled the fleet command channel. "Admiral Morrison," he said, "the Defiant is lost." Catherine's voice came tight and steady. "Can you disengage?" Rodriguez laughed softly. "Negative. They're not letting go." There was a pause. "Captain," Catherine said quietly, "you don't have to." "Yes," Rodriguez interrupted, still smiling. "I do." He cut the channel and turned to his bridge crew. "All hands. Abandoned ship." Some stared at him in horror. "You've got 60 seconds, he continued. "That's an order." Escape pods fired from the hull in streaks of light. When the last launch cleared, Rodriguez returned to the captain's chair, and keyed the manual reactor override. As thousands of Kreshkar bioships burrowed into the Defiant, thinking they had captured prey, the ship accelerated straight into the densest core of the swarm. Then the fusion reactor went critical. The explosion became a newborn star. Everything within 10 kilometers ceased to exist. The detonation vaporized thousands of bioships instantly and ruptured entire layers of the swarm's attack formation. The hive mind reeled. Prey did not self-destruct to kill the hunter. Prey fled. Prey surrendered. Prey did not bite back with a sun. The swarm turned savage. The Kreshkar adapted again. Megavessels moved forward, kilometer-long horrors with multi-layered armor and gravitational anchor limbs. They latched onto human cruisers and attempted to drag them apart. The cruiser, Thunderchild, lost both starboard engines and began venting atmosphere. Captain Alvarez made no attempt to retreat. Instead, he aimed the wounded ship directly at the nearest megavessel. "All hands," he transmitted, "hold fast." The collision shattered both Titans into cascading wreckage, but the impact cracked open the megavessel's core. Two intact destroyers immediately poured railgun fire into the exposed interior, gutting it from within. Every human loss opened a breach that another ship exploited. This was not elegant warfare. This was mutual annihilation managed by willpower. The hive learns fear. The swarm had fought for thousands of years. It had devoured warrior species bred for battle. It had dismantled empires armed with planet-breaking technology. It had never encountered prey that accepted destruction as a weapon. Now it did. As human ships rammed, as fighters detonated themselves inside attack clusters, as crippled cruisers continued firing until their last reactor failed. The hive mind registered something new: loss. True loss, not just expendable biomass, but resistance that reduced its total future harvest. The swarm began to calculate, and calculation led to a strategic shift. The tide shifts. 12 hours into combat, the tactical officer reported on the bridge of the Indomitable. "We've lost 7 ships, 14 more heavily damaged. Casualty estimates approaching 3,000. "And the enemy?" Catherine demanded. A pause. Then awe entered the officer's voice. "Confirmed destruction of at least 1.5 million Kreshkar bioships. The swarm is pulling its core away from Valora Prime. They're refocusing entirely on us." Catherine exhaled slowly. "Good. That means the civilians are still alive." On Valora Prime, Ambassador Veltrin watched the battle unfold on emergency projections. The sky burned with silent explosions. For the first time since the invasion began, the pressure on planetary shields eased. The Gelnari fleet, what little remained of it, rallied. Crystalline ships, battered and scarred, repositioned beside human warships. They projected shields where human armor failed and provided precision targeting data for railgun volleys. Together, the strange alliance began to push back. The ground threat emerges. Then the Kreshkar made their next move. "If we cannot take the prey in space," the hive mind calculated, "we will consume them on the ground." Massive landing carriers, each the size of a small city, broke from the swarm's main body and angled toward Valora Prime. "They're deploying surface invasion forces," a sensor officer shouted. "Targets are population centers. Direct drops." Catherine's jaw clenched. She had known this moment would come. "What's the Gelnari's ground defense capability?" she asked. The answer was exactly as she feared. Minimal. Crowd control units only. No military formations. No heavy weapons. Meaning the swarm's ground monsters, creatures bred specifically to harvest living worlds, would tear through unprotected cities in minutes. Catherine did not hesitate. "All carriers," she ordered, voice cutting through the bridge like steel. "Prepare marine deployment. Drop pods hot. The descent begins." Deep inside the Indomitable, alarms wailed. Marine bays came alive as thousands of powered armor suits locked into deployment racks. Servo motors whined. Weapons safeties disengaged. Sergeant Marcus Chen sealed his helmet. Around him, 3,000 Terran Marines prepared to do what the swarm did not expect any prey to attempt: fall from orbit into hell itself. "Launch in 30 seconds," the drop master called. Marcus's squad took their final positions inside armored coffins of steel and fire. He opened a private channel. "This is it," he said to his squad. "We hold the line. We do not break. We do not let them through." 12 voices answered as one. "Yes, Sergeant. Launch in 3, 2, 1, drop!" The pods fired. Fire streaked from orbit, and the battle for Valora Prime was about to become a war of blood and blades. The moment the drop pods launched, the world became fire. Sergeant Marcus Chen felt his pods slam into acceleration, a brutal punch that crushed him against the restraints. Even through power armor stabilization, the force rattled his bones. The pod screamed as it knifed downward through the upper atmosphere. Orange-white plasma blossomed around the hull. Warning lights flashed red. Hull integrity dropped in small increments as turbulence clawed at the pod. Marcus did not blink. This was routine. This was what Marines trained for. Other species would have passed out before breaking cloud cover. Humans called it Tuesday. Across the comms, someone was singing, badly. Reyes, of course. "Country roads, take me home." Oof! A violent shake cut him off. Marcus smirked despite himself. "Save your breath, Reyes. You're going to need it." The drop master's voice cut in. "Impact in 10 seconds." Marcus braced. The pod hit the ground like a meteor. The impact cracked the earth, sending shockwaves through shattered pavement. The explosive bolts detonated, blasting open the pod doors in a burst of steam and shrapnel. Marcus stepped out into hell. The fall of a beautiful city. Hours ago, this district had been a garden, a palace of crystalline towers and floating walkways wrapped in shimmering vines. The Gel Nari had shaped their cities like art, growing structures from luminescent crystal trees that curved and twisted like frozen rivers of light. Now, flames devoured everything. Towers lay toppled and split open. Bridges sagged under corrosive burns. The air smelled of acid, smoke, and fear. Gel Nari civilians ran through the streets, skin flashing panic colors, telepathic cries echoing across the emotional spectrum. And behind them came the crash car. The ground forces of the swarm were nightmares made flesh. 3 meters tall, armored in jagged chitin, with too many legs and too many eyes. Their mandibles dripped acidic saliva. Their claws carved the ground in deep gouges. They moved fast, far faster than something so large should move. Marcus raised his rifle. "Form the perimeter," he shouted. "We hold this street." His squad emerged from their pods in perfect formation. 12 soldiers, 12 armored giants. The hum of their exoskeletons filled the air. The reinforced plating along their suits shimmered with adaptive camouflage. The crash car saw them and charged. The street shook beneath the stampede. Civilians screamed and dove for cover. Marcus fired the first shot. His rifle barked. A hyper-accelerated, armor-piercing round slammed into the lead crash car's thorax. The creature stumbled, but kept coming. He fired again. The second round pierced deeper. The third found the gap in the chitin. The beast collapsed, skidding across the ground at full momentum. "Contacts front!" Davis yelled. The Marines opened fire in a coordinated storm. Rifles spat metal death. Grenades arced through the air and detonated, shredding clusters of Kreshgar into chunks of smoking flesh. Plasma charges lit up the street, boiling anything that crawled, but the swarm never attacked alone. From the ruins above, smaller Kreshkar creatures, spider-like scouts, rained down. They screamed in ultrasonic pulses that scrambled unshielded nervous systems. The Marines didn't flinch. "Reyes, drones left flank." "On it." Reyes launched 2 micro-drones that zipped upward, spraying shrapnel in tight detonations. The scouts fell like broken puppets, but the main horde was still coming. "Fall back to checkpoint Alpha," Marcus ordered. "Keep civilians behind us." They moved as a single organism, backward, methodical, never breaking formation. Every step they killed something. Every meter gained was paid for in blood and bullets. Behind them, Gelnari civilians sobbed and clung to one another, as Marines became the wall between them and annihilation. The Marines do not break. A monstrous Kreshkar soldier slammed into the Marine line, ripping at armor plates. Marcus emptied half a mag into its faceplate, but it didn't drop. The creature shrieked, claws scraping sparks across Marcus's chest. With a snarl, Marcus drew his combat knife. The blade was monomolecular, sharp enough to cut steel. He sidestepped, letting the Kreshkar's momentum carry it past, and drove the knife deep into its neck joint. The creature spasmed, tried to scream, then collapsed. "Chen, on your right!" Davis shouted. Another Kreshkar leaped from a shattered balcony. Marcus dodged and rolled, firing point blank. The round blew the creature's brain sac open, spraying bioluminescent gore across broken glass. Marcus rose. More were coming. A lot more. A perfect ambush. Elsewhere in the city, Lieutenant Sarah Kim's unit held the narrow entrance to a civilian shelter buried into a hillside. 10,000 Gelnari refugees were inside. The Kreshkar wanted in. "Claymores planted?" Sarah asked. "Yes, ma'am," Private Johnson replied. The first wave came screaming down the slope, hundreds of armored horrors clawing over one another. "Stand by," Sarah whispered. The Kreshkar drew closer. Closer. Now! The Claymore mines exploded in overlapping arcs of steel and fire. Shrapnel tore through legs, eyes, mandibles, slaughtering the entire front line instantly. Grenades followed. Then automatic fire. The slope became a killing field. But the swarm climbed over their own dead, using corpses as ramps. They surged closer with every wave, driven by blind hunger and hive mind rage. One Marine screamed over comms, "Armor breach! I need... Ah!" Another Marine dragged him back into the shelter entrance, blood pouring from the breach in the wounded man's suit. "Hold the line," Sarah shouted. "Nobody falls back." Hours passed. They never broke. Marcus's last push. Marcus and his squad pushed toward the evacuation shuttle plaza, a wide crystalline platform surrounded by burning towers. Civilians flooded toward the shuttles in panicked clusters. Marines and Gelnari volunteers tried to keep order, but terror overwhelmed reason. Kreshkar ground troops stormed out of the ruins behind them. "Sergeant," Reyes called, "we've got a fresh wave. Big ones." Marcus glanced over his shoulder and saw them. Hulking Kreshkar brutes, easily 4 meters tall, 6 limbs thick as steel beams. "Davis, anti-armor launchers." Davis fired 2 rockets. Both brutes absorbed the hits and kept moving, chitin glowing from internal heat buildup. Marcus swore under his breath. "Concentrate fire." A dozen rifles fired in unison. The air shook with impact after impact until one brute collapsed in a smoking heap. The other roared and barreled forward, smashing into the plaza. It grabbed a fleeing Gelnari child. The child screamed telepathically, a sound that cut through the mind like a blade. Marcus didn't hesitate. He sprinted, armor servos overloading as he threw himself into a tackle. He slammed into the brute's side, knocking it off balance. The child wriggled free and fled, but the brute wasn't done. It grabbed Marcus, lifted him, squeezed. His ribs cracked, his armor split. Blood filled his mouth. Marcus snarled through the pain. "Davis, now!" Davis fired a plasma charge at point-blank range. The brute's torso exploded. Marcus crashed to the ground, coughing blood. "Sergeant, you're hit!" Davis knelt beside him. "I'll bleed later," Marcus growled. "Get that shuttle loaded." The last 3 civilians. The plaza finally emptied. Only 3 Gelnari civilians remained, huddled beneath a collapsed bridge, too terrified to move. Marcus limped toward them. Each step sent lightning through his injured side. His visor flickered. Blood dripped down his armor. But he moved. He lifted one child into his arms and motioned for the others to follow. Davis supported him. Reyes covered their rear. They made it to the shuttle ramp just as Kreshkar forces broke through the last barricade. The engines roared. Marcus shoved the civilians aboard and turned to Reyes. "That's the last of them," Davis said. "Let's go." Marcus hesitated. He scanned the ruins one last time. No more civilians? he asked. "None, Sarge," Reyes said softly. Marcus nodded. They boarded. The shuttle lifted off as flames blossomed behind them. A hero's quiet moment. Inside the shuttle, Marcus slumped into a seat. His armor was cracked open. The medical system pumped painkillers through his bloodstream just to keep him conscious. A small Gelnari child approached him, trembling. She held something in her hands, a tiny crystal flower, pale blue with silver edges. "Thank you," she whispered through her translator. "You saved my family." Marcus stared at the flower for a long moment. Finally, he took it gently. "You're welcome, kid," he murmured. "That's what we do." The shuttle rose above the burning city. The Marines inside stared at the destruction below, at the towers collapsing, at the flames spreading, at the bodies of friends and enemies alike. They had saved thousands, but they had lost many of their own. The human wall holds. Across Valora Prime, similar scenes played out. Some Marine squads held until evacuation was complete. Some died to buy others time. In one infamous engagement, a lone Marine, his armor shattered, bleeding out, crawled into a Kreshkar landing ship and manually detonated the charge that destroyed it. His name would later appear on monuments across two worlds. The hive mind began to falter. For the first time in its existence, it understood something it had no word for. Resistance. Not prey, not food, not biomass, but a species that refused to break. A species that killed even as it died. A species that fought like predators. A species from a death world. The Kreshkar had never known doubt. For thousands of years, the hive mind had advanced from system to system with mathematical certainty. Consumption followed the same unchanging equation. Arrive, overwhelm, harvest, move on. No prey had ever endured long enough to alter the outcome. Until now. Above Valora Prime, the battlefield had transformed from a feeding ground into a killing field. The swarm still numbered in the millions, but its formations were fractured, its command nodes disrupted by continuous human strikes. Mega vessels that once directed entire attack wings now drifted as burning carcasses. Smaller bioships collided with one another in confused surges, their coordination faltering under the relentless pressure of human persistence. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Catherine Morrison stood rigid before the tactical display. "Enemy cohesion dropping across 3 sectors," her tactical officer reported. "They're retreating from the upper orbital band." "They're stalling," Catherine said, eyes sharp. "They're calculating." As if on cue, new movements flared across the screen. "They're pulling back ground carriers," another officer shouted. "Surface forces are disengaging." On Valora Prime, the roar of battle began to thin. Kreshkar ground beasts that had thrown themselves endlessly against Marine lines now hesitated. Some retreated toward their landing ships. Others simply froze, caught between the hive mind's conflicting directives. For the first time, the swarm did not advance. It withdrew. The last stand that broke the swarm. At the outskirts of the southern evacuation zone, one final cluster of Kreshkar brutes made a desperate push. They surged forward in a reckless mass, driven by a last instinct to feed before retreat. Only one Marine squad stood in their path, Lieutenant Sarah Kim's unit. They were running on fumes. Ammunition counters blinked red. Armor was cracked. Shields were offline. Half the squad was wounded, and one Marine lay dead behind the line, covered with a makeshift blanket torn from shattered alien fabric. "Contacts massing," Private Johnson warned. "This is it, ma'am." Sarah checked her rifle. 8 rounds left. She keyed her squad channel. "No one falls back," she said quietly. "We hold here. For the civilians. For each other." The swarm charged. They came like a living avalanche. Sarah fired until her rifle clicked empty. She dropped it, drew her sidearm, and kept shooting. A Kreshkar leapt the barricade and slammed into her shield, claws carving sparks from battered plating. 2 Marines pulled it off her and blew its head apart with a shotgun blast. Johnson went down seconds later, screaming as acidic blood ate through his thigh armor. Another Marine dragged him backward while firing one-handed. The line began to buckle. Then, without warning, the creche car froze. Dozens of them halted mid-charge. Their mandibles twitched. Their many eyes flickered as the hive mind seized control for one final decision. Then, as one, they turned and fled. Sarah stood in stunned silence as the monsters that had tried to kill her moments before sprinted toward their retreating carriers. Her comms crackled. "All units," a voice announced shakily. "Enemy ground forces are disengaging across the entire planet. I repeat, they're running." Sarah sank to her knees. It was over. The swarm breaks. In orbit, the change was even more dramatic. The creche car fleet shifted from aggressive encirclement into full withdrawal. Their remaining megavessels formed defensive shells as carrier groups peeled away from Valora Prime and fled the system. "They're retreating," a sensor officer cried. "Full system withdrawal vector." Catherine stared at the tactical display, scarcely daring to believe it. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the creche car swarm was running. "Pursuit?" her tactical officer asked. Catherine shook her head slowly. "No, not today." She lowered her gaze. "Let the galaxy remember, they ran." The last of the swarm tore open crude subspace wounds and vanished into the void, leaving behind millions of drifting corpses, shattered biovessels, and the silent wrecks of their failed invasion. The counting of the dead. Silence fell over the battlefield. Not peace, never that. Only the recovery teams launched from every surviving human vessel. Shuttles descended to the surface. Medics flooded ruined districts. Search and rescue units cut through collapsed alien crystal with laser saws in trembling hands. On the bridge of the Indomitable, the casualty reports came in wave by wave. 7 human ships confirmed destroyed, the tactical officer said. 14 more heavily damaged. Estimated human fatalities, 2,847. The number settled into Catherine's chest like a slab of ice. 2,847. Not statistics. Names, faces, lives. She knew many of them personally. She had read their files. Their hometowns, their families, their favorite foods, their hopes for after the war. Now those futures were gone. But as the casualty list finalized, another number appeared on her display. Gelnari survivors, 2.3 billion. Catherine closed her eyes. Every one of those lost humans had bought time with their lives, and that time had saved a world. Marcus Chen and the cost of breathing. In a makeshift medical zone near the ruins of the evacuation plaza, Sergeant Marcus Chen lay on a stretcher with his armor removed in sections. His side was wrapped in regenerative bandages. A medic adjusted a vascular stabilizer embedded just below his ribs. "You were lucky," the medic said. "Another centimeter and the claw would have collapsed your lung." Marcus exhaled weakly. Lucky's a funny word today. Across the tent, other Marines lay motionless under sheets. Some groaned in pain. Some did not move at all. Reyes sat on a crate nearby, helmet in his hands shaking. Marcus closed his eyes. Davis, the steady one, the launcher expert, the man who never missed. "Tell me about it later," Marcus said quietly. "Right now, we keep breathing." Reyes nodded, swallowing hard. Outside the medical tents, Gelnari civilians gathered in hesitant clusters. They watched the humans with awe and fear intertwined. These strange predators who had stood between them in extinction. They had seen humans burn, and they had seen monsters fall. The hive mind's last realization. Far beyond the Valora system, in the dark between stars, the creche car hive mind reeled. It had lost millions of vessels. Entire genetic production strains were annihilated. And worst of all, it had failed. Failure was not a concept the swarm had evolved to process. Prey was meant to be consumed. Prey was meant to break. Prey was meant to run. But the prey from Earth had hunted the hunter. They had pursued through fire and vacuum. They had destroyed themselves to destroy more of the swarm. They had shown no panic in extinction-level combat. The hive mind absorbed the data, and for the first time in its ancient existence, it marked a species as something other than prey. It marked humanity as a rival predator. The ambassador, and the Admiral. In the shattered heart of Valora Prime's capital, Ambassador Veltrin walked through the ruins of her once beautiful city. The crystal spires were broken. The hanging gardens were burned to ash. But the streets were filled with the living. Her people. They wept. They sang. They clung to each other in exhausted disbelief. Veltrin found Admiral Morrison near a grounded human destroyer that had barely survived atmospheric re-entry. Engineers worked silently around them, welding and reinforcing the wounded vessel. "Admiral," Veltrin said, her colors rippling with emotions her species rarely felt all at once. Grief, relief, shame, gratitude. Catherine turned. Her uniform was blackened with soot. Her eyes were red with exhaustion. "Your world is safe," Catherine said. "We'll help you rebuild." Veltrin hesitated. "Why?" she asked at last. "We feared you. We quarantined you. We called you dangerous. Why did you come?" Catherine looked around at the smoking ruins, at the injured humans and Gelnari working side by side. Then she answered, simply, "Because you asked, because you needed help, and because we could." Veltrin stepped forward and placed her hand gently over Catherine's. "Then your people are more than warriors," she whispered. "They are guardians." The war for Valora ends. As the last fires were extinguished and the final evacuation shuttles lifted off, the reality of what had happened settled over two worlds. Valora Prime had not fallen, the swarm had not fed, and the Deathworlders had not failed. The war for Valora was over, but the echo of it would travel across the galaxy for generations. News of the battle for Valora Prime spread across the galaxy at light speed. Merchant relays carried raw combat recordings. Automated beacons repeated tactical summaries. Civilian networks leaked fragments of helmet cam footage. Marines standing against towering monsters. Human ships ramming living dreadnoughts. A destroyer turning itself into a star to save a world. For the first time in 50,000 years, the Galactic Council convened in panic. The Great Hall was no longer filled with calm deliberation. It roared with overlapping voices, flashing colors, electromagnetic shrieks, and psychic shockwaves. They defeated the Kreshkar. Zextari's geometric form spun erratically. A single fleet. This should be impossible. They lost nearly 3,000 soldiers, another counselor argued. That is catastrophic. And yet, Veltrin said, her voice carrying through the storm, 2.3 billion of my people live because of them. Can any of you say the same? Silence struck the chamber like a hammer. High Chancellor Morden rose slowly, eye stalks heavy with something that looked very much like shame. "We feared the Deathworlders," he said. "We locked them away because we believed their capacity for violence made them unfit for civilized society." He turned his many eyes toward Veltrin. "But perhaps," he continued, "we misunderstood what danger truly means." Whisper through void drifted forward, light pulsing faintly. "You suggest that their violence is not a threat, but a shield." "Yes," Morden said quietly. "The Kreshkar could not be reasoned with, could not be restrained, could not be outgrown. Only one species in this galaxy was capable of standing before them and saying no." He paused. And they did. The debate raged for hours, fear against gratitude, philosophy against reality. Some argued humanity was too unpredictable, too aggressive, too dangerous to be trusted with galactic authority. Others pointed to the wreckage drifting around Valora Prime and asked a single, brutal question. If not humans, then who? At last, the council voted. It was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Humanity's new place. Ambassador Lin Chen of Earth stood alone at the center of the Great Hall. Around her gathered the ancient powers of the galaxy, beings who had once feared her species as barely contained predators. She did not bow. She simply spoke. "You have spent much time debating what kind of species we are," she began. "Let me make it simple. We are humans. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We learned to endure. We learned to fight. But we also learned to protect." She looked slowly around the chamber. "Yes, we have wars. bloody ones, terrible ones. But we also have people who run into burning buildings to save strangers. Soldiers who throw themselves on grenades to shield their friends. Parents who would die without hesitation for their children. Her voice hardened. You see Deathworlders. You see danger. We see survivors. And sometimes, survivors must become guardians. The vote was finalized that very day. The quarantine on Earth was lifted. Humanity was granted full membership on the Galactic Council. More than that, Earth was formally recognized as a protector species. When threats arose that peaceful civilizations could not face, humanity would be called. And humanity, by precedent now written in blood and fire, would answer. The return home. 3 weeks later, the shattered remnants of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet returned to Sol. They did not come back in triumph. They came back in silence. Hospital ships escorted the wounded. Recovery vessels carried the dead. Across Earth, memorial services unfolded in every time zone. Flags dipped. Names were spoken aloud. Families wept. Admiral Catherine Morrison stood beside thousands of others as the honor guard folded flag after flag with slow, reverent precision. Each one represented a choice. A volunteer, a life traded for billions. Sergeant Marcus Chen stood in dress uniform among the rows of black and silver markers. New medals rested heavy on his chest. He barely noticed them. What he noticed were the letters, thousands of them, messages from Jelnari families, from children who still breathed because human Marines had stood in the fire, from parents who still had sons and daughters because strangers from a distant death world decided their lives were worth protecting. On the worst nights, Marcus reread every single one. The monument. On Valora Prime, the Jelnari rebuilt their capital, but at its center, they erected something new, a monument of living crystal, taller than any spire that had stood before. It depicted a human Marine in full armor, weapon lowered but ready, standing watch over the city. At its base were carved the names of the 2,847 humans who never returned home. Above them, words burned with soft internal light, written in both Jelnari script and English. Here stood the Deathworlders. When we called for help, they answered. When we faced extinction, they said no. The strength to fight is nothing without the compassion to protect. Alien children would one day stand beneath that statue and ask their parents who the humans were. And their parents would answer, they are the ones who came when the monsters did. A legend is born. Across the galaxy, a new phrase entered common speech. When a world trembled, when a shadow rose from the void, when the impossible approached, someone would whisper, call the Deathworlders. And somewhere under a yellow sun, on a violent blue planet that had forged survivors out of predators, humanity would listen.